Wednesday night rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
Always great to welcome Ronan O'Gara to the show. How you doing?
Hi Joe, how are you?
Very well. Are you superstitious?
No.
Okay.
Go on, why? What's your next question?
Well, look, I mean, for every knockout European game, you talk to me on the Wednesday beforehand so far this year. So look, if you win again this week, I'm just sowing that seed, you know? You don't want to break a winning habit.
No, I sure do not, and I like your positivity tonight. It's unlike you, actually.
It is, yeah. No, it's true. It's true. Congratulations. That must have felt good.
Yeah, I think there was an overreaction to it big time, I suppose. I think the fact that guys at home maybe and don't see much of the French rugby, unfortunately now, I think when I was playing, we always got it on Thursdays and Sundays on Sky Sports, and it was a good wrap-up of French rugby of the top 14. Obviously Europe is different, but maybe I think because of the bizarre circumstances, people are starved of rugby, and they didn't really know how, I suppose, French clubs are going. They knew how the national team was going, obviously with the Six Nations, but we got a good night in terms of weather-wise, but we played well at times. We were inaccurate at times, as I said after the game, but as you say, Joe, there was no doubt it was pleasing.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, you'll be happy to hear that on Virgin Media, the free-to-air game this weekend in Ireland is La Rochelle against Sales. So look, if I need to ask some tough questions about the La Rochelle manager, I'll enjoy doing that. Just don't you worry. Knives sharpened. Does he need to go, Matt Williams? These kind of questions. Actually, do you know, your interview with Martin Bayfield and Ugo Monye went, like wildfire all over the internet as well. Like, you're no fool. You would understand the power of the media. Do you try and, give the media stuff and be interesting in those moments? And you're aware that, that area of the job can, lead to bigger things? Or do you just trust your instincts? Or what? Do you have a strategy there?
No, I don't. The one golden rule I have is be honest, because if you try and make up stuff, it'll come back and bite you. So what's in my mind at the time, I can speak openly and freely about, obviously to a certain degree, with that you don't hurt any of your players or your management team. But I've seen other people in certain positions in coaching who have, I suppose, said stuff that wasn't accurate, and it came back to bite them. So for me, my rule with my players is that if it's a tough message, they prefer a tough message than an inaccurate statement. So that's the big thing for me. I think the more you're honest with them, the more they respect you, even though they mightn't like it in the long term. I think you can sustain a relationship with them.
I know it was interesting you said to the two lads as well, to Ugo and to Martin Bayfield, that you think to yourself sometimes as an out half out there, how would I like things? How would I like the team around me? Do you still kind of see the game a little bit through out half eyes predominantly?
Yeah, I do, because our halfbacks, not necessarily 10, but 9 and 10, because for me they're the two that can shape the game the easiest, because if all the kind of most of the decisions, they're in control of the ball, and obviously the eyes outside them for scanning opportunities are super important, but the communication channels kind of start from out to in as opposed to in to out. I think you'll have practiced certain plays during the week that you have a hopefully they will work, and you've previewed the opposing team to defend like this or to attack like this, but there also has to be some amount of adaptability within your plan in case a different picture is thrown at you. So the 9s and 10s, the big thing for me and my, I suppose, coaching philosophy is that there has to be kind of minimum 3 options, and the good guys will pick one of the 3 options. I don't really want them for certain having to pick a certain option, because for me that becomes robotic, and I don't think it becomes sustainable, and I think that's where you lose excitement, especially in an 11-month season in France, where you can't be intense for 11 months, Joe. It just doesn't work like that, and it's a very different model to You mean for even the Champions Cup sprint this year, to the league basis that we're involved in. So I think there's that element of excitement around Champions Cup, and I think that's where we got that probably lift in performance, as opposed to maybe the Bordeaux game was good as well, but the key is to keep that going.
What would you do if you had a player in a pivotal position who kept picking the wrong option if you gave that player the 3 options?
I would talk to myself and take a few deep breaths. And but I think it's a good question, but I think that's why you put such an emphasis on preparation, and then I think you can kind of live with yourself afterwards. But if you haven't, I suppose, set your players up to succeed, or you haven't armed them with the right tools to make decisions under pressure, or you haven't created those conditions in training, it's not going to happen on game day for the first time. It's very, very irregular that happens. Great players can do that, and they can come up with their own stuff, but like 80% of the players need guidance and they need direction. But if it's only one option, I think that becomes very limiting. Yeah.
You mentioned something else after that in that interview with the 2 lads, Ugo Monye and Martin Bayfield. The KBA thing, the Crusaders thing, keep the ball alive thing, and there's that Southern Hemisphere focus on that. And I've heard you say it even in the Virgin Studios over the last while, and here on Off the Ball over the last while, that there's a ruck, more of a ruck focus predominantly in the Northern Hemisphere. I presume, though, given that, like, you know, Graham Henry, Joe Schmidt talk about the ruck as the heartbeat of the game, and they're 2 Kiwis. I presume you still do an awful lot of work on the ruck, and you still think the ruck is unbelievably important, or do we overestimate the ruck?
No, you don't, and that's a good point, and it's something that I think you have to talk accurately about, because of the weather conditions in the Northern Hemisphere, and when it's played, an awful lot of the games are on a wet surface. So, like, it becomes advantage to the defence, because you can kind of tackle the ball as well as the man, and that becomes very hard to control the ball in slippery conditions. The conditions we got at the weekend were summer conditions, which a lot of Super Rugby games are played, and they're also played in a lot more space than the Northern Hemisphere teams give each other. So it's a very, very different sport, in fact, when you compare and contrast European Cup rugby to Super Rugby. It's very, very different, Joe, and I think that cannot be stressed enough. But I think around the ruck, you look at the Irish team under Joe Smith and how good they were, and how accurate they were, and how excellent they were at recycling ball. That is exactly what the ruck looks like done well. In my experience as a player or as a coach, I don't have the technical detail to coach it well enough.
Right.
So I lean on, obviously, John O'Gibbs, and I lean on Roman Carmignani here and Greg Patat to help me in that. But unless you're kind of an expert, you can't own it, and you become a little bit fluffy around it. So for me, I'm trying to get the best around the ruck in that regard, because like there are times when you can't offload the ball, and it's not a good option to offload the ball.
Yes.
But there are other times where, depending on the speed you attack with, it may become a viable option to play the ball out of the tackle, which is, I suppose, very Toulouse-ish or very Crusaders-ish. But with the decision making combined with that is the key point.
It's so interesting as a rugby head coach, more so than so many sports. Like, I couldn't think of a soccer coach saying, well, Jesus, I don't have a clue about that part of the game. Whereas in rugby, you know, you're so reliant on your scrum working. Like, you're praying to God your scrum coach has done his job, or the breakdown. So like, if Joe Schmidt called you up and said, O'Gara, tell me what you know about the breakdown, you wouldn't fancy your chances in that conversation?
No, sorry, I think I have adequate detail, but adequate doesn't cut it at this level, Joe. I think I understand it, but like to coach international players, which most of these guys are, or to coach at the top level, and to be an expert or to be a leader in that regard, you need to have a cutting edge over someone else that's coaching it. And I think that's I understand it.
You know, I get that. So would that manifest, for instance, say at half time of a given game, and the players come in and it's evident to everyone, geez, the opposition have been killing us at the breakdown. Would you be would you know why, or is that where you'd be relying on someone to help?
Yeah, of course you would, yeah. But that means if you're killing them at the breakdown, it means that you're bringing the ball to ground as well. So depending on, the great thing now is because you get such good stadia and underfoot conditions are really good, so footwork can be done and acceleration can be worked on, and there is an option. It's just you have to make, I suppose, your players aware that sometimes seeking the grass isn't a good idea for quick ball. And some people, unless you build them up in confidence, and you hear it in schoolboys rugby, in the fact that so many of the players playing the game are assigned as just cleaning out at the ruck or carries in the ruck. That can't be enjoyable. If every day of their training week is built up to them having clean outs and very good clean outs, wouldn't it be a great idea if they were actually a carry option before that, and in that pot of three, that, you know what I mean, there's one ball carrier and the two around them adapt.
You talk as well, and this is the last one, it was just from the other night. I just thought it was such an interesting interview, and I thought, well, it's worth expanding on a few of these points you made. You talked as well about putting speed on the ball. This is something you want your team to do, to put speed on the ball. But you said there is a risk with that, which people, I think, can understand. So what jumped out to me was putting speed on the ball and taking risk. I would, and I don't want to do your Munster team a disservice, right? But I would associate your Munster team that you marshalled as, like, amongst many other things, about like a pressure game and, you know, territory and all this stuff. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't get the impression you were talking about getting speed on the ball in the way you're talking about it now with La Rochelle. So have you changed and the way you see the game, or has the game just changed?
No, I think the fundamentals will always be the fundamentals. You know, I can give probably a good example of this. To try, I was on the receiving end of it, and I touched it down under the post, actually, in Bordeaux when Munster beat Toulouse in the semi-final in 2000. And it was a beautiful day, and I think before I received the ball, I think there was 5 offloads. And we started to play on the left-hand side on our own 22 with a, you know, we saw the space, we played to the space, and we kept the ball alive. So you're going back over 20 years there, Joe, and that's where, that's for me there's nothing different in that period of passage of play than what was played on Friday night. And that's, for me, is the reality of it. I think I like the fact where you try to overspeed it in training, and it's probably something I'm experimenting as a coach with, to see how you can do that. And I watch a lot of football, and I kind of watch Man City, and I'm fascinated with their work without the ball, how they kind of high press, and just how it just feeds into their own energy and their own speed. Then when they're on the ball, that the kind of 40 seconds they've done pressing, I think takes an edge off the team they're playing, and that means that they can play their attack game a little bit easier. So the game has changed in many regards. Yes, I still think that there is a place, no matter how athletic the forwards are nowadays, they still love a little the ball in front of them at times, and chasing the opposition and keeping them in the corner, like England have done for many a season in a successful campaign. But you know, there's so many different options and so many different wrinkles to play, and the reality is that you need you need a lot of tools in your toolbox if you want to be successful.
That's true. And look, that Toulouse game, it was about 30 degrees and it was hot, and you can play that kind of rugby. To be fair to your Munster team, they would have played a lot of winter rugby on lashing rain in Limerick, so you can't be going bananas then.
Yeah. Well, exactly, and I think there's an intelligence with that as well.
Yes.
You know, in terms of knowing. And you know what I mean? I know for a fact that the Crusaders have a game plan within a game plan, depending on if the heavens open and it becomes pouring rain, that there's just a language that they use, that they're able to flip between one and the other. And I think players like that, because they need direction. It's easy for us in the coaching box or at home watching to go, why don't you do that? But it's hard for someone to come up with an idea against 15 fellas that are trying to dispossess them. I'm sure. And so if you haven't trained it.
Would Crusaders, if the heavens opened, become less likely to take risks?
I wouldn't even use risks. I would say there's a higher likelihood that they'll play smarter, i.e. The kind of ruck to kick ratio would be lower, if you understand me. So you play, if there's beautiful conditions, you may go, okay, if we're not going anywhere after 10 rucks, we might kick.
Okay.
If it's difficult weather conditions, that might be with the Crusaders, because they're probably quite adventurous as it is. It might become 3 or 4.
Okay. So you get little bit more likely to get rid of it.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's just good sense. That just makes sense.
Sorry, you get rid of it.
Oh, sorry. Kick intelligently. Kick intelligently.
Correct. As opposed to get rid of it. You know what I mean? That is probably the counter-attacking in Super Rugby is extraordinarily good.
Yeah. You can't kick loosely.
So getting rid of it is a handy one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We could even get you a job doing that. Close the eyes and peg it down the pitch.
Well, listen, I can kick the thing. So Sale then at the weekend. They're third in the Premiership. They've won 10. They've lost 5. They beat Exeter last month. You know, they're good team. Alex Sanderson is there now, if people hadn't realised. Obviously, he was very synonymous with Saracens. He talked about facing the La Rochelle Galacticos Stars this week in the press. So he has you down as Galacticos. They put 57 points in Scarlets at the weekend. 57 points to 14. Lots of forward power. AJ McGinty at 10. He scored 32 points. So, I know this is tricky. We won't dwell on this because you can't talk on the radio about the opposition. But broad terms, what are you seeing in Sale?
Yeah, a good team. I think a hungry team. You can see the change in management has worked there. And they play a high pressurised game and they have multiple threats. So they'll be difficult, but every team at this level is going to be difficult. The great thing about it is that it's an opportunity, and we're gonna go for it.
Yeah, I know you've played them a couple of times in the not too distant past. Are they games that you'll revisit in your mind, or even watch again, or are they ancient history?
No, I haven't, because they're
irrelevant.
They're pre-COVID, and I just think now we're in a kind of a space where it's just, I think with this period of our sporting careers, it's a very, I suppose, surreal period at one level. So I nearly kind of do the analysis of games with empty stadia as opposed to full stadia in terms of trying to analyse, because it is a home game technically for us in a neutral ground, and the reality is we didn't have competitive fixtures at the end of last season. So even though it's in my second season, it feels like it's the first competitive season. And they've had new management, so it's very very new to both parties.
Interestingly, so 8 teams have made it to this stage. 5 of them are French, 1 Irish and 2 English. What we're seeing at national level in France, so is there a bit of a kind of, it's more than just that? Are we seeing something special happening in French club rugby at the moment, or is it just, one of those years and hard to explain? Or what's your read on 5 of 8?
No, I think the standard is definitely coming up, Joe. Okay. I think the top 14 is better this year. I think the standard is rising all the time. I suppose a lot of coaching groups are being made more accountable for performance as opposed to home and away before in France, and especially now with COVID and the results going not along expected home results. But like there's some serious firepower in, Racing, Clermont, Toulouse, Bordeaux, and ourselves, and that's then you have other teams like Stade Francais knocking on the door, Montpellier, and you saw Lyon. So it's competitive games every week. But the good thing about it this weekend is it's not a French opposition we're playing, and I know we played Gloucester, but it's nice to change and get into a kind of a sprint mentality of a Champions Cup week.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know you had a look at Munster Toulouse. Toulouse winning 40 points to 33 this game. What did you make of Munster? Where are they? These are the big moments where you judge them, because like Van Graan can say, well, we've won 16 of 20 games and we're doing lots right, but it's in the knockout stages you really judge where Munster are. So where were they at the weekend?
I thought they were very good. I genuinely did. I would be in that camp. I think that's, as an ex-player watching that, I think it's a good performance, Joe. Right. I think, teams I played on, we had days like that too, where I think you gave it your best shot, but you weren't good enough. I think they'll be disappointed with the fact that they were in control of the game at half time, and at times they made Toulouse look ordinary. But they didn't do it enough, and then they lost control of the game at critical periods. So, and they'd be disappointed, even considering how good the weather conditions were, to give up as many points. That Munster's defence is usually a lot stingier than that, and it doesn't happen. So to score 33 and to give up, what is it, 40, is it? That'll be the bit that'll sting them. But I think, they'll be probably more frustrated with the fact that the week previously Leinster are a brilliant side, but you mean to score 6 points against them would be more disappointing from Munster's point of view, because at least they fired so many shots in the game against Toulouse that I think you can kind of accept that performance mentally.
It's interesting. Rory O'Connor on the back page of the Irish Independent has the story now that the Waratahs are after Stephen Larkham, given Rob Penny's gone there. So we'll have to see how that develops, and Larkham can get out of his contract he has a clause, he can get out if a head coach job like that comes in. So that's brewing in the background. The other thing that was going on this week, I'd be curious for your thoughts on it. A lot of people in the media over here, and Munster fans, they looked at the signing of Jason Jenkins, the South African lock, and they didn't like it. They felt that that's Jenkins now coming at lock. They have R.G. Sneeman at lock, they have Jean Klein at lock, and the likes of a Thomas Ahern and a Finian Wycherley waiting in the wings, and they kind of think like just rushing out and buying another South African. And it's nothing against him, by the way. I'm sure he's a good player and all the rest of it. So where are you on like identity? And I know like Dougie Howlett and Tapoka and Maffey and all these guys, I know they played such a role in your era. But your sense of Munster identity at the moment, what do you make of you go out and get Jenkins signing?
It's I think you have to have strong reasons, I think, to sign a third second row, especially to have, I suppose, so many overseas players in one sector of the engine room. So I think what was dominant in my times playing with them, I think the recruitment was so well done and so skillfully done and so carefully selected. But now the game becomes more and more professional every year, and opportunities become probably more difficult with signing players. But I think you have to have a big element of trust in this, Joe, on the fact that if the coaching staff who's in charge view that this guy is going to make a big difference, you back it. That's how it works, because it's not them. There's a big responsibility to play local players, but if you feel that you're going to enhance your team by recruiting an overseas player and you're allowed to do it, well then that's what they're doing. Yeah, it's hard to comment on something like that, because I don't think we have the full picture or the full scenario, and we don't know. And I certainly don't know from watching games I have to see, like, as you said, we talked earlier in the conversation about like who's a line-out caller, who's a jumping forward, who in the second row, and there's kind of, it's like a combination of who can play with who. So I don't have that detail to give you an answer, but you can see that. If the two young Munster second rows are getting squeezed for game time, and it isn't an overpowering reason, then it'll be difficult questions to answer. Yeah,
and do you? I know, because you've been away for a while now. I don't know. Do you talk to people on the structures behind the scene, like a big picture kind of conversation, and the link up with schools and clubs in the area? There seems to be, depending on who you're listening to, I've listened to Donald Lenihan over the last couple of weeks, or Keith Wood was making the point here on Off the Ball AM, that there is a level of dysfunction behind the scenes at Munster, that your batch came through the clubs and that worked well, but last 10 years it doesn't seem like behind the scenes it is a good picture. Do you have a sense of that, or are you too far removed?
No, I don't.
Okay,
genuinely.
No worries.
I'm out too long, Joe.
No worries.
I don't know, and I don't. I have obviously a few contacts still there, but I haven't heard.
Grant, no, that's fair. You don't have to comment on national radio. Our rugby coverage and Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsor of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in. Last one for you. Leinster Exeter at Sandy Park should be interesting. How do you see this one going?
Game.
Yeah, defending champions. We know what Exeter are about. Saw them win it last year. Lots of forward power, to say the least.
Yeah, they have power everywhere. I think same as Leinster. They're the two best teams in it for me.
Are they?
And,
right.
Yeah, I think because you look at what Leinster have done and you look at their big game appetite and their capacity to deliver, and then Exeter are probably
champions.
The present and the current are the coming force as well. So you looked at that game against Leon where started slowly and a lot of teams have panicked, and they made easy work of the Leon team in the end. So it's an absolute incredibly difficult game to call because there's such quality on both sides that I think it literally comes down to who makes better decisions on the day.